All right, welcome to the party, my friends. We're going to get started today. Jump in to talk a little bit about MSTR's performance this week. It hit a 454, 455 price point, then got rejected back down to 440. So we're going to dive into that. Bitcoin obviously smashing an 11% gain this week and then got rejected back to about 116, climbing higher today. And we're going to jump into some end of year price predictions for Bitcoin from several different voices that I'm going to share as well. And also going to talk about the previous bull runs and look at Bitcoin's trajectory over the past previous bull runs and what kind of trajectory we're making now. So we're going to jump in with all this, not tax advice, not financial advice, not legal advice. Do your own research, educational purposes only. So let's jump in with MSTR. It's good to see you all. Bill, TCC, Metagirl. And let's jump in. So strategy now has crossed 600,000 Bitcoin, which is pretty significant. We're $73.2 billion in today's prices, give or take, as the price fluctuates up and down. MSTR is now the biggest corporate Bitcoin whale. As you saw, they bought 4,225 Bitcoin for 472 million last week. They have various different ways that they buy Bitcoin, tapping the ATM with common shares, Stride, Strife, Strike, the usual suspects, and they are continuing to buy. They have bought every single week this year except 1 week. The average buy price of their Bitcoin is $71,000 approximately. Pretty cool. And Bitcoin smashed 123K, my friends. And then we saw it pull back, and this is as of yesterday, to about 120, and then it pulled back down today, and it even went below 116 today, 115 and change. So we're seeing a little bit of a pullback on this, as you saw, but hitting 123,000 and going up approximately 11% over the course of a week is pretty impressive, which is very, very cool. So we've got that in 1 week, 3 straight record closes fueled by ETF inflows. And that's pretty exciting. You know, if you watch it, the all-time highs that were hit over the last week and Bitcoin smashed 3 all-time highs, that's a significant run up. The fact that we got to 123,000 in July so far is pretty significant. And I'll share with you what some of the experts are saying in a little bit. Just some voices of a $200,000 Bitcoin. We will see in 2025. Strategy rocketed up the other day, 3.8%. We saw it bounce off today, even as Bitcoin was falling heavily today. Strategy was really sitting around like 444, 452 today. I think went as high as 454. So strategy has been doing very well. It's been holding strong. Somebody had made a comment last week saying that MSTR is decaying and Bitcoin's going up. But if you look at the rate of return this year, I'll show you in a second, it's approximately strategies up about 55% this year, depending on the time you looked at it, whether it was today or yesterday. But it's up about 55%, and Bitcoin's up around 28%. I have a slide that will point that out. So stock is up 55%. Here it is in 2025 versus Bitcoin's 28.5%, and S&P 500 6.6%. So if you look at that, strategy is outperforming Bitcoin. And I know that people have been concerned about strategy's price over the last several months. And if you look at it now, it's very, very strong, very healthy, and moving in the right direction, which we'd like to see. And S&P only 6.6%. Where do you think the money is going to be flowing to over the next decade? Yep, Bitcoin, 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 and MSTR. Crypto week in Congress. We got U.S. lawmakers. They're debating major crypto bills this week. We got potential stablecoin rules and digital dollar pathways with the Genius Act. This is all boosting confidence in the crypto markets and a pro-crypto push from Trump, as we all have seen this year. So let's hear from Michael Saylor and what he has to say about Bitcoin overall in the marketplace.
Of capital are flowing into the network. It's going to go from 2 billion to 20 billion to 200 billion to 2 trillion to 20 trillion to 200 trillion. And when it gets to 200 trillion, it'll chop along at plus 20% to eventually 300, 400, 500 trillion dollars. And where is that capital going to come from? It's going to come from Russian real estate. It's going to come from Chinese private equity. It's going to come from everything in Africa, everything in South America. You have capital flowing from foreign financial and physical assets to Bitcoin. You have capital flowing from 20th century assets to Bitcoin. To the capital is going to flow from the 20th century to the 21st century. It's going to flow from physical to digital. it's going to flow from currency-based derivatives to a digital commodity derivative. So it's already happening. It's unstoppable. It's literally like, for me to say Bitcoin's going to demonetize gold understates it. Yeah, it's going to demonetize gold. Then it's going to demonetize the real estate that's 10x more than gold. Then it's going to demonetize every long-term store of value. So what you have is a situation like the Europeans show up and they give like some Dutch guilders or some pieces of paper or some glass beads or seashells or stone coins to people using a more primitive form of money. And we have the opportunity to, in essence, just grab 10, 20, 25% of the network, let the entire dynamic flow, and it's going to accelerate. And when the dust settles, the American people will own 25, 30% of that capital, which right now is sitting in 20th century.
There you go, Michael Saylor. So powerful, the man, the myth, the legend. He's been more right and more right than anybody on this, and he continues to crush it. Chronicles is asking there, I think we will hit over 500 this month. Totally possible. I know some technical analysis is calling for over 130,000 on Bitcoin. So what's that? That's a if Bitcoin goes over 130,000, then from where it is right now, that's a 10% bump on Bitcoin. Really, let's say Bitcoin was at it's at 117, 118 right now. So that's a 10% bump on Bitcoin. Strategy's at 442 of the close. So if Bitcoin bumps 10% and Strategy bumps 15%, let's say, a 15% bump would put Strategy over 500, which would be pretty cool. So it'd be awesome if it closes at 500. The day close on Strategy in terms of its high is a 73 closes its highest during the day. And then after hours, it's 543. So we will see. All right. So Bitcoin on the global stage, countries like Bhutan, UAE, and Saudi Arabia are rumored to be stacking Bitcoin as well. And it's no secret that Bitcoin is the new digital gold. And some of what depends on Bitcoin's next moves, I see somebody in the chat saying if M2 versus Bitcoin accuracy is to be trusted, then we are going higher in Q3 and Q4, says Zach Anthony. And I believe that too. It's following the money supply, and it's following it very, very in sync. And the money supply continues to go up, which means there's more money in the marketplace. And if we have interest rates drop and we have a lowering of interest rates, which we should see this year, then that's going to free up more money into the economy. And that's going to have more money for people to invest and put in quote unquote risk on assets like Bitcoin, which would push the price higher. Let's also not forget about the S&P 500 with Strategy. If they get added this year, we'll know in September if they get added this year. They certainly qualified already, but they need to be added, and it comes down to a vote. And if they do get added this year, then there will be billions of dollars of inflows into MSTR, which would push the price even higher. So we're looking in very, very good position right now. I think we're poised for a great year-end run. And the fact that we moved up in July was big. You know, I was hoping we would move up in June, and we moved up in July. And it's a big move for Bitcoin. It's a big move for Strategy. And it's also an indication of, I think, a big move for the end of the year. Not financial advice, but I'm personally counting on that. So lower rates, of course, are more risk appetite for people. So there'll be more Bitcoin buying, and the dollar weakening also boosts the Bitcoin value as well. And so if inflation cools, Bitcoin could soar even faster. And I think we'll see some of that happen. We are seeing the dollar weaken. We are going to see lower rates, I think, this year. And so all of that would be good for Bitcoin. So that's exciting. If you look at the halving effect, I'm just going to give you guys a history of the halving effect of Bitcoin, so you can look at how Bitcoin moves after the halving. Obviously, there's much more different indicators and things that are in the play right now that determine where Bitcoin moves, such as corporate adoption, such as governments buying. But the halving still plays into effect because of the supply. And of course, we have less and less supply. So let's just take a look historically, just for games and fun here, of the history. So if you look at 2012, you have a price at halving of $13. So in the halving in 2012, the price was $13 for Bitcoin, and the following year's peak was 1,152. As we know, when a halving happens, Bitcoin typically runs up between 12 and 18 months after the halving, and that's pretty much where we're at right now in that period. So the gain was huge back then because Bitcoin was obviously a smaller asset then. And so the gains were much bigger at 8,762. But then you look at the 2016 halving and you look at the price at the halving was 664. And then the following year, the price was 17,760. So you had a gain of like 2,500%. And then you look at the 2020 halving and you look at the price at the halving was 9,734. And then the following year's peak was 67,549. So you see a gain there of 594%. Any of you who have lived through those halvings, you know that. I lived through the 2017 halving and the 2020 halving as well. And I started stacking the majority of my Bitcoin around the 2020 halving, around the $9,000 price point. And I bought my first Bitcoin at 3,000. So this was a big year and a big run up if you live through it. And then some people think that it got called short in terms of the peak at 67,000, that we should have gone higher, but it's still equated to a 594% gain. So now you look at the halving now, the 2024 halving, the price at the halving was 64,000. So we know the ETFs came out. We had the halving and the price was around $64,000. And right now we're sitting around 120,000, call it, even though we're at 117,000 today. So the potential target could be 200,000, and then that return would be 3x. Make sense? So again, prior having 594%, to think that we could do a 3x with Bitcoin in this halving, I don't think is too unreal. So there's a couple companies that talk about Bitcoin going to 200,000. We've got Bitwise, which is like a crypto company that does a lot of index funds. Their CIO is predicting a $200,000 price point. We have Standard Chartered Bank, which does a lot of, it works with a lot of governments, corporate clients, super affluent people. They're more of a conservative bank. And for them to come out with a $200,000 price prediction, I would say that's coming from a conservative source, and it's pretty cool to see that. And then Anthony Scaramucci, if you follow him at all, he's talking about a $200,000 Bitcoin price point. So there's people throwing it around. Some people think it'll go lower. As I've said in previous videos, I would be thrilled if we hit 180,000. I'd be like very content if we hit 180, and I'd be thrilled if we hit 200K. So if we hit 200K, you can do the math and figure out where you think MSTR would go, and see what that might mean for you. Jeff's asking me, what was it like mining that one Bitcoin? Really hard to do. I mined a Bitcoin back in 2000. I think it was more than one Bitcoin actually, but back in 2017, I mined a Bitcoin. A guy came to me and he asked me to invest in some mining equipment, and the mining equipment for the miners and stuff like that, it was a pretty significant price point. So I invested the money. And I thought it was a cool idea. I really didn't understand much about Bitcoin at that time in 2017. And that's the first thing that got me interested. With that, we mined a couple Bitcoin. And from that, he couldn't pay the electricity on it, which I had no idea what the hell he was talking about at the time. Had I known it was cheap to pay the electricity in terms of my perspective, I would have just paid the electric bill and kept doing it. But he shut it down. And if you look at my investment in the mining equipment that I gave him, and then you look at the Bitcoin that I got, which we were mining at like, it was around $3,000 the price then, I would say I made out well on it with that, considering the price is 20x right now. So yeah, I made out well, but I made out profitably, but not crazy profitably because the investment in the mining equipment. But there you have it. Those are the fun stories of what it was like. It wasn't hard for me because I just invested money and somebody else ran it. Make sense? So there you have it. But those are my early days of knowing nothing about the space, but we all dive in and we figure things out and we try different things. And for me, that was my first Bitcoin, which is cool. First couple Bitcoin. So what's the implied game if Bitcoin hits 200,000? This is saying 211%, but it's really not. It's just a double. So that would be 100% gain. So from the 64, oh no, it is 200%. So 64,000 to 200,000, which is a 3x, which is 211%. Pretty cool, right? So could we do 3x this year from the price point at the halving? I think it's possible, and we will see. So as I said, some experts are predicting. As we were pulling some data on this with my team, I was like, what experts are you talking about? Let's just give the names. And so the names are the ones I just gave you. So you take it with a grain of salt. Everybody's got their voice. I don't think anybody knows particularly exactly what's going to happen, but I think the consensus is getting more and more to where 200,000 for Bitcoin is real. this year. Whereas before July, the indicators of government adoption, of corporate adoption going wild, and all the things we started to see happen, I think a lot of people were going, wow, you know, it looks good, but the price isn't moving. So is 200,000 real? Now I think with all the indicators in the right space, and now the price is moving, I think it becomes more real to people to say we could hit a $200,000 Bitcoin. With all that said, you got to take it with a grain of salt. You have to, the factors I'm looking at as time moves on, not necessarily for my Bitcoin position, but to give you my viewpoint on my MSTR position. With Bitcoin, I'm just going to hold on to my Bitcoin. Maybe take a little bit of profits, but probably not. I'm just going to hold it and accept the fact that Bitcoin could go up to 200,000, go back down to 100, and maybe it goes even lower. It could happen. So just accepting that fact of looking at this from a long-term horizon of looking at 20 years out. It's interesting if you want to take a look for yourselves. If you put it into a calculator and you look at the return of Bitcoin over the next 21 years, like Saylor's talking about, and you look at a 29% return on investment over 21 years, whatever your Bitcoin value is, it's a significant ROI. Like if you actually look right now, we can all just do this together. And you said, let's say you had somebody give me a number that you want me to put in of how much Bitcoin. Like, do you want me to put 10,000 worth of Bitcoin, 100,000 worth of Bitcoin? What do you want to put? Somebody put it in there. Are they down at the bottom? Somebody put in the chat. What do you want to say? Great. So let's just go with this. Let's say you had $50,000 worth of Bitcoin. So $50,000, right? And then you just say, like, let's say $50,000 goes up at 29% a year for the next 21 years. What's the value? So if you look at this, Paul says 10. I'll put in 10 for you in a second, Paul. So you look at 50,000 goes up at 29% a year for the next 21 years. And you look at the math on this, it's a significant return on this. So let's just see it calculating here. Well, that's weird. Hold on a sec. Give me 1 second. Somebody can probably do it faster than me. My device is acting up. But if you look at it over time, the compounding of it, it's a significant gain. So I'll put it in a different calculator here. So it's significant to see where the value would go up. So let me just put it in a different calculator here. So $50,000 at 29% ROI for 29 years, or 21 years. So if we look at this math on 50,000, yeah, so it's a $10,500,000. So that's pretty significant, right? If you look 50,000, and then if you were to do 10,000, you wanted me to put in Paul, it's just 5x less than that. So if you put 10,000 in, now do it with 10,000. So $10 million if you put 50 grand in, and then if you do it with 10,000, you got $2 million. So this is like if one's looking in the future or looking at retirement. Now, of course, you could do like, you know, today's, what's that worth in today's dollars, and you got to factor into account inflation and stuff on it. But if you look at that, I mean, $50,000 at this 29% for the next 21 years, that's $10 million. That's a good chunk of money. And so today, I don't think most people have thought in those terms because we're typically used to looking at 10%, 12% returns, and people calculate that over time. But if you really look at it from a 29% return on investment compounded, and that's what Saylor thinks Bitcoin's going to go to, 29% a year for the next 21 years. So is that far-fetched? No. When you look at the S&P doing an average of 14% over the last decade, and over the last 5 years, the S&P has done about 110%. So it's over 20% a year the S&P has been doing. So when you look at that, to think that Bitcoin will do 29% is not far-fetched at all, you know? Yeah, and Bitcoin will definitely survive 20 years to answer BA over here. So yeah, I think it'll absolutely survive. So that's significant cash, you know? And thinking about the future and thinking about the future of Bitcoin. Now, when we take a look at a different turn with this, with strategy, where do you think strategy will go? My personal viewpoint on Bitcoin is I'm holding Bitcoin, but strategy, I am going to take some profits at the end of the year. So if Bitcoin's going to go up to say 200,000 or 180 and drop in half, which is possible because we've seen 80% drawdowns on Bitcoin over several times. We've seen it over the bull runs. So you could anticipate a 50% drawdown possibly. Some say the corporations will keep buying and the governments will keep buying, and that'll keep the price afloat and it won't drop as much. But I would be planning for a 50% drawdown personally. So if Bitcoin drops 50%, what could MSTR drop? You could see MSTR drop 100%. So if you think MSTR is going to go to 800, it might drop down to 400. If you think MSTR is going to go to 1,000, it might drop down to 500. If you think MSTR is only going to go to 600, it might drop down to 300. You see what I'm saying? So I would just take a look at, for me personally, I'm looking at my own perspective of end of the year, what profits am I going to take and around when am I going to take them? And I'm going to be looking to take them around the November timeframe, because historically that's when we've seen Bitcoin peaking and having big months, particularly in 2020, 21-ish. So I'm going to be looking at that and taking a look at MSTR profits at that time. So just my personal point of view and not financial advice, just how I'm looking at things. So if Bitcoin goes to 200K, that's 80% gains from today's price. We have Metaplanet as now holds 16,352 Bitcoin. So that's pretty significant. They're following the MicroStrategy playbook, using Bitcoin as collateral for their expansion. And we found that they're now diversifying into other strategies in terms of buying other companies and acquiring other companies and looking at cash flow companies. So they're not exactly following the strategy playbook anymore because they're diversifying their interests into other companies as well, where strategy is sole focused. But they report a 19.4% Bitcoin yield for early July, and that's huge. And that's how these companies are measuring Bitcoin yield, which is getting more Bitcoin per share. That's the purpose of strategy, is to get more Bitcoin per share for the shareholder. There you have it. Okay. So strategy and Metaplanet, they both use similar strategies to actually acquire Bitcoin by issuing common shares. Strategy obviously has their other preferred stock and things like that to do it as well. This is no secret to anybody. Strategy has only paused 1 week this year in buying, which is pretty fucking cool, right? 1 week they haven't bought Bitcoin. Pretty impressive. So 12-week Bitcoin buying streak before the pause. They resumed with $472 million last week, and or this week, I should say. And there's some wild cards always in the marketplace that we need to look at. Like you have trade tensions that are there, you have Fed decisions, you have inflation as wild cards. But despite the wild cards, Bitcoin is still persevering and outperforming. And so I don't think anybody thought it was going to get to this point who didn't know about Bitcoin. I think us who love Bitcoin and love strategy fully believed and knew that this was going to happen, but mainstream did not. So I think mainstream is really freaking jumping up and down and what is going on with this Bitcoin thing? And I have friends now that have known about it. And my friend called me the other day. She's like, I bought my first Bitcoin, So there are some people getting in, but we have a lot of corporate adoption and a lot of big institutional money on this. Particularly, you look at BlackRock, they're freaking gobbling up the Bitcoin. If you saw, I keep mentioning this, but I think it's pretty significant in case you missed any of the prior shows. You really see that BlackRock is fully vested in this thing, not just the fact that they own over 700,000 Bitcoin that they bought for their funds, but the fact that they earn a significant amount of fees from their Bitcoin ETFs. And so it's their third largest producing fund in terms of fees that they generate is Bitcoin out of 1,900 different funds out there. So they're going to continue to push Bitcoin. And Fink is fully behind this. And when you have the largest financial institution in the world, in terms of investment institution like BlackRock pushing this, you got a pretty solid, future. And when you have somebody like Strategy pushing this, and you have the corporate adoption, it's a big time game. Which is why a lot of us look at the dips as discounts right now. Anytime there's a dip, we look at it as a discount, especially long-term holders of this. So if you remember in 2022 and 2023, we had the downturn, and then Bitcoin has rebounded strongly in 2024 and 2025. So if you bought in the downturn, I bought Bitcoin again when it was 30,000 during the downturn. And so if you bought in, then you made out well also. So downturns are good opportunities to buy more. So we've got the game in play. Saylor, of course, says there is no second best. He continues to buy more Bitcoin. And we've got other assets that are lagging far behind. We've got companies using Bitcoin to power their balance sheet. I mean, come on. If you look at the last couple months, the number of companies springing up, if this is not an indicator, I don't know what it is. This is a screaming indicator that Bitcoin is absolutely 100% the future. And for anybody who didn't think so, there it is. So no longer holding their money in cash. Bitcoin will be the treasury. And I think in a decade, we'll see the majority of companies in the world having some Bitcoin in their treasury. Bitcoin yield is the new measurement stick. Bitcoin per share. That's the game for corporate companies on this. And Remy says MNAV is adjusting close to 2x right now. Don't we love to see it? Remy's saying that in the comments. Absolutely. Adjusting to 2x. That's where we like to see it and above. And strategy is on the move, my friends, which is super good news. So where do you think Bitcoin's going to hit? Where do you think strategy is going to hit? I'd love to hear your predictions in down below. Many people are talking about $200,000 Bitcoin. Some people are talking about a peak at 140,000. Again, it's just voices out there. One needs to follow their own counsel and own input and own financial advice. So crypto markets are just getting warmed up. Institutional corporate adoption. I don't think betting against Bitcoin is the smart move anymore. Anybody who's betting against Bitcoin clearly doesn't understand it. But again, be careful. There can be drawdowns of this at the end of a bull run. Okay. Strategy never stop stacking. This is strategy issuing this on X. We now hodl 3% of all Bitcoin in circulation. Spot ETFs, this was the other day. So this is a post from the other day, marked $1 billion in volumes in the first 10 minutes. That's massive. And last week's treasury operations generated a Bitcoin gain of 2,485 Bitcoin, worth $291 million for MSTR shareholders. That is pretty freaking cool, right? Pretty cool. And Saylor says the OCC, which is an organization that just kind of regulates the national banks, et cetera, and you have the Fed and you have the FDIC, reaffirmed that banks may offer custody and safekeeping of crypto assets, such as Bitcoin, under existing risk management expectations. So this is big, big news. You heard some of this, prior to this months ago, and now we're just seeing it more and more as a stable thing that, Bitcoin is, it's being accepted by banks. It's being considered an asset. You can go and get a mortgage now by pledging your Bitcoin because it's being seen as a real asset, and it's a big deal. Okay. So Mark Moss says Bitcoin is absorbing global asset value with real estate seen as the final boss, holding 114 to 190 trillion. Final boss kind of means like the final store of value, like things are moving over into Bitcoin as being the main store of value. And then, people in traditional finance are like real estate as a store of value or gold as a store of value. And he's saying that Bitcoin is going to absorb up even the final boss, which is real estate, and more money is going to flow into Bitcoin. And you look at the bond market's got 133 trillion, real estate has 390 trillion, stock market's got 124 trillion, and 8 trillion sitting in USD. So Bitcoin's going to absorb some percentage of that, which will continue to drive it higher. And Jeff Walton says MSTR just hit a new all-time high in terms of its ranking 83rd largest US company by market cap, 125 billion. Is on day 9 toward S&P inclusion, which basically means in September, we will know for sure if strategy gets accepted in the S&P. If they don't get accepted in September, there will be other shots to get in, but S&P is the vote for the S&P 500 is in September. So we'll see if they get added on. If they do, it's a big deal. If it's not going to 0, it's going to 1 million, says Michael Saylor. Well, there you have it. From the man, the myth, the legend, speaking truth. And those are the final words for today's show from Saylor. So I hope it serves you guys. I hope you're doing fantastic. And I hope you have a great rest of the week and enjoy the run right now. Enjoy the run. It's been a good run. I feel like we've earned it. We've stayed true. We've stayed the course. And we've earned these returns. So, and the smart people have paid attention, gotten educated on Bitcoin and strategy. So have a great rest of the day. If you have not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do it. Leave some comments down below, and then I'll see you guys in the next show. Stay well.